Okay.
Right, yeah, I'd be happy to start. Sorry, a whole row of people just arrived as I started speaking. So sorry if I can also move if you can hear me. So yeah, as you might have heard, 48,000 workers across all of the UCs, academic student employees are currently on strike, and these represent three different unions.
Wait a second, Michael. Would somebody please? We should all be muting ourselves.
I
I
think
think
that's
that's
from
just
the
the resident
picket.
noise. I can actually find it. Maybe I can find a quieter spot. Maybe if Connie can start, and then I can find somewhere quieter to go.
Dick, you're muted if you're.
Okay.
Michael, keep going. You can unmute yourself and speak.
Oh, okay. I'll go ahead while Michael,
Okay.
while Michael's moving. I am so glad to see Michael here because he has just been in the forefront of all of this organizing, and he came to the local Santa Barbara Faculty Association meeting and presented, and it was just, I can tell you it's going to be so helpful hearing from him. So as Dick was saying, I'm here in my capacity as the president of the Council of UC Faculty Associations. We could call it a quasi-union. I kind of like to think of it as a proto-union, but it's been around since the 70s, and it is an independent, dues-paying organization that represents academic senate faculty. However, all the faculty associations are made up of academic senate faculty, but we, as an independent organization, can do things that the academic senate cannot do because it is, its mandate is academic professional considerations, and not at all the kinds of political things that we know we need to do. So the Faculty Association, and there's Michael back, the Faculty Association has been very organized around backing this strike. And now let's get back to Michael.
I appreciate it. So yeah, like Connie was saying, so this current strike that's been happening since this Monday, so the 14th, is the largest strike of academic employees in the country, and so that's it's 40,000 people across three different unions. So that's UAW 2865, which is the union that represents TAs, UAW 5810, which represents postdocs and academic researchers, and then SRU UAW, which is a new union that's forming around GSRs, so graduate and student researchers. So a lot of people that work in STEM and labs sort of are work through that kind of position, and so they're forming a new union as well. So we're all kind of at this moment where over the last several months we've been bargaining at the same time with UC, and have all collectively gone on strike together. And basically the reason for the strike is because of UC's repeated unfair labor practices at the bargaining table. This is across all these different units that are bargaining. I'll drop something in the chat if that's helpful. It's from a website called Fair UC Now, which is a really good resource, fairucnow.org, which is a great resource to learn more information about what's going on, and particularly around unfair labor practices. So there's this link that I dropped is around all. This is effectively what enables the strike to be called, because it's a UOP strike. And in terms of why people are out here every day sort of yelling in front of the library in this case, and across all 10 UC campuses every single day, is the fact that the heart of the issue is that things haven't changed very much since COLA 2020. If you all remember that, it was a wildcard strike, so the context was a little different in that time. But the issues here are still the same: rising housing costs with very little, with a 3% wage increase every year, and we're currently sitting at inflation of 8%. And so effectively every year we're taking a pay cut. And at the table so far, in each of the different units that have been bargaining, the UC, at least in our case for TAs, hasn't really budged from this an offer of 7% the first year, a wage increase, and then 3% every subsequent year, which is nowhere near what we're asking for in terms of our living costs, our ability to be good teachers and graders and researchers at this university, and to be well supported. And a lot of people, have kids, have families they have to support, and it's impossible to do that on basically a less than $24,000 salary, which is the base salary for TAs all across all the UCs. And Santa Barbara is particularly bad. Out of all the UCs, I think Santa Barbara and Santa Cruz consistently have the worst rent in terms of average bedroom, because at least in places like Berkeley and UCLA, there's more options, but in places like Santa Barbara, rent's obviously very expensive, and there's not a lot of other housing options available. So even grad students who are living in graduate student subsidized housing, which is around $800 per month, they're still rent burdened at 35%. And so our basic ask as collectively across all units is for us to be paid enough to not live in rent burden. And so as many probably know, rent burden is a sort of federally defined category of paying more than 30% of your income towards your rent. And we're just basically arguing for that no worker at UC should be able to have to do that. And we sort of calculated across all the different UC campuses and found that $54,000 a year in terms of salary would be a number that would lift most ASCs and GSRs out of rent burden. So that's the sort of ask we have to the UC currently. That's the biggest sort of one maybe you've heard in the news, the one that most people are rallying around, because obviously it's getting more and more unaffordable to live in a place like this, and similarly across all the UCs. So I can stop there, and then I can, happy to go into anything, any specifics or anything like that. Yeah.
Well, tell us about the participation in the strike. What is this looking like, and what are the actual activities? Just give us a feel. I should tell for people who just joined, this is Michael Nishimura, who's a strike leader, sociology graduate student, and he's calling in from the picket line. So nothing could be more authentic than this moment on Zoom. Thanks. Go ahead.
Thanks, Dick. So in terms of the initial, maybe I can start the numbers with the initial authorization. So out of the 48,000 workers that are represented across the three unions, 36,000 voted yes to approve the strike in the first place in the strike authorization vote, and that was 97% across all units. Sorry, I might have lost you there for a second. Is it okay?
You're good.
Okay, great. And so first of all, there was overwhelming support for the strike to even happen in the first place. So in terms of, that was 3 weeks ago now, when the strike was initially called for a vote. And in terms of participation, I'm sure you've seen photos and videos across all the different UCs, just like huge groups, crowds of people in the thousands across basically every single campus. In terms of UCSB, we typically have had a really big crowd in front of the Arbor, the library space. That's been the main sort of central area for the picket. And then we've also had two recurring pickets, one on East Campus and then one on West Campus, that sort of changed location based on the day, just to sort of hit different spots on campus. And there have been, I think as folks mentioned in the beginning, there have been a few really big marches. So on the Monday, the first day, there was a really big march. I had never seen that many people here. I wasn't here for COLA, so I didn't experience that, but people were telling me it felt like 2020 in that sense. And yeah, so there were so many people around here that day. And then also yesterday, as I think, both Connie and maybe Howie were both there at the faculty-led rally, which was really powerful. The SB faculty association came out and organized a bunch of people and supporters and did a march throughout campus, which was really great, and that coalesced in another rally here. And so yeah, the energy here has been really good across, and I think the same across all the campuses in terms of movement. It feels quite different in a lot of ways, and yet at the same time, it also feels like a lot of normal operations are still happening in some sense. There's a lot of people still out and about, classes still happening. So I think that's something that we're thinking about in terms of organizing it as well. Yeah, figuring out how to make the disruption even more felt in order to get the contract at the end, which is what we want.
So you have any word about the negotiation process? Is there any sign of movement? Sorry. Did you hear me? Did you hear my question?
No, sorry, Dick, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, is there sign of movement on the negotiation front that you're aware of?
So I'm not super tapped into the current negotiations, but from what I can tell from our bargaining reps, the movement does not seem to be much at all, if any. I think maybe GSRs have gotten some very incremental movement in terms of the offer for wages at maybe by 1% or something, or 3% or something like that. But what we're asking for, I think, as a collective, is something very transformative. It's more than 100% of what we make currently, and so the offers that the UC have been consistently giving and really hasn't budged at all are just so quite low that they're almost offensive in terms of in terms of what we're actually bargaining over and fighting for. So in terms of wages, not necessarily. I think there have been other things that have been secured this week. I believe the SRU, the SRU union, the one that represents GSRs, have sort of secured an article that's been enshrining their recognition as a union. So I think it's a really good first step in terms of really cementing the fact that they will be a union, sort of classifying who belongs in that union. So I think that's a really positive step. But across the whole, I don't think people have been sensing a lot of movement on the UC side.
So let me just say that if people have questions that occur to you, just put them in the chat. And Howie just suggested that the union demands be posted to the chat. So any information like that you can add, Michael, that would be great. Just put it up there. People are very eager to. So there's a good question. What is the current salary that you experience? What's the base pay that you
Yeah, so currently the base pay for TAs, which I'm a TA, so I can speak from my experience, is slightly less than 24,000 per year, and so that's sort of the base scale. I think that's what most TAs get paid. Maybe some departments supplement a little bit more than that, but the base is less than 24,000. And then in terms of what the UC is offering, so they offered a 7% raise the first year and then 3% every subsequent year. But that would effectively make us so that means in 4 years' time, we would barely be making $30,000. So that's the sort of offer that has come back from the UC, and experiencing inflation, really high inflation. Who knows what's going to happen with that? Experiencing people who are still continuing to struggle to make rent, pay their bills, and so we see this as like basically an unacceptable offer from their side. So yeah.
So question, what has been the effect of the strike on campus so far? Classes and research going on? What's the disruptive strike aims to disrupt normal business? How do students, undergraduates feel about the strike? Those are, maybe you have observations about that.
Yeah, great. So yeah, in terms of disruptions to campus, so yeah, I mean, the central sort of goal of the strike is to disrupt normal operations and basically prove that the UC really can't function if all the three, the workers represented by the three unions that are on strike, if they all stop working, that basically the UC cannot function as normal. So that's the ultimate goal in order, to secure our contracts in the end. And there have been, there rallies every hour. There's a rally every class changeover. Typically, is when these sort of chants and marches are planned. When more people are out and about. People have been. I know there have been some coordination with other unions. The Teamsters, for example, I think have stopped honoring the deliveries. So some deliveries haven't been going through to campus. Which has been great. I know initially the union representing the local bus drivers initially said, they wouldn't drive to campus, and so we're seeing a lot of solidarity from other unions, which is really fantastic. And so I think, I think as much as the disruptions are happening, there still are a lot of classes happening to my in terms of my perception. And so I think that just takes more organizing, right, to make sure that people understand the reasons why this is happening, to sort of get on board. And because I know in terms of answering the second question about undergraduates, I think a lot of undergrads in general that I've talked to are really supportive. They really understand, they understand what it's like, to be struggling and not being able to make rent, living in an extremely expensive place. So I think they totally understand, and they actually, everyone that's coming to me is like, I always love my TAs. I know how much labor they do. And it's really important, that they are paid fairly. So I think they're on board in that sense. I know some people are sort of anxious about classes and grades, since these things are kind of up in the air. But as a whole, I think undergraduates have been really supportive. But I think the issue is that a lot of, and maybe Connie can speak to this too, is that I think a lot of the issue why, campus both looks abnormal and still quite normal, and sometimes is that a lot of classes are still happening. Therefore, students have to do work for their classes. They have to write papers still. They're still kind of going through the motions of doing class. And so I think if we're more, I think if we can effectively, from a ground game level, organize to really get faculty who are Senate faculty. I should say importantly that I will disclude lecturers at UCSB who are represented by UCAFT, who have a no strike clause in their contract. So they actually can't cancel their classes in solidarity, because that's it's enshrined in their contract in that way. So barring lecturers, I think, who teach around maybe a third of the classes at UCSB. So I would assume that, so at least a third should be operating as normal. But I think we have so many Senate faculty members still who are, operating like normal, that we want to encourage, to stop their labor in solidarity with us, which is, I think, a longer conversation on organizing. But I don't necessarily see the strike ending that soon. So we have some time to sort of work on that, I think.
So Connie, this is maybe your chance to talk about the faculty reaction to the strike, and how faculty who support the strike are doing that. How are they acting in this? What's your view on that? And then anything else that you want to, I think there's a context for the strike that you and others of us have been working for years around, that have to do with the privatization of public higher education, the underfunding by the state of higher education, and that this is a key part of that struggle. So take it. Unmute.
First, let me just thank Michael for all the tremendous work that he's been doing. I've seen you everywhere. Just thank you so much. Thank you so much. And my perception too is that there aren't nearly enough faculty who are supporting this strike by, as is our right, withdrawing our labor in support. And that means canceling our classes and doing nothing that would do anything to impede the success of what the union is trying to accomplish here. And I put in the chat, there's links to the Santa Barbara Faculty Association, and we have up there lots of footage from the march, the rally that we had yesterday. and a great deal of information about how faculty can participate. And we're reaching out to all of our fellow faculty members who are in the membership of the Santa Barbara Faculty Association, but also to all Academic Senate faculty on the campus. I can say that I have canceled my classes, and I am, out of courtesy, not because I'm required to, but out of courtesy, informed my department chair and my colleagues there, just to get a sense. Now, one of the things that we are trying to do, the faculty associations, which are, by the way, I don't know if I said this, but they're on all 10 campuses of the University of California. And so we are trying to, through the faculty associations, get an assessment of precisely how many faculty are withdrawing their labor or otherwise, supporting, but of course, that's the most important way to do it. And we are trying to figure out how many are there. As we know, press coverage is so important, and we are ecstatic that it has been just so good, both statewide, nationally, and internationally, the coverage of the strike, for once, really focusing on what the demands are, and giving good context too about the import of this action, which has been called, the largest labor action, the largest strike in U.S. higher education history. Okay, so one of the things that the Council of Higher Education has the Faculty Association has tried to do is come up with an FAQ of faculty rights and responsibilities, and because the Faculty Associations are the political arm of the Academic Senate, we can do things that the Academic Senate can't do, which is, hire lobbyists, hire attorneys, to vet these, labor attorneys, and who are very informed about the Faculty Code of Conduct and UC, so that, and then to disseminate that information, not only just to the Faculty Association membership on each campus, but each faculty association can also choose to get communications out to their entire Senate list. Okay, so one of the problems that we're having, though, is if we want to try to get all the faculty associations gathering the numbers of faculty who are participating, we just have to be careful with that, because we don't also want that information to be that public in some ways. So we need to, we don't want names and all of that to be available. So we're working on that, because press coverage, as I said, has been excellent, but what do they want? They always want numbers. They want to know how many faculty are doing this, so that's one of the things that we're working on right now.
So there's a question that maybe Michael could answer. What is the act? So graduate student, the $24,000 figure that, for example, would be a TA's salary, that's for half-time work, right? And does that mean that students need to work additional hours in order to finance the, give us some more of a sense of the everyday economic struggles that individual students might be having that help motivate this whole action?
Sure. Yeah. For sure. So that's right. It's around $24,000 for 50% FTE, and so and that's actually the max for a lot of people that graduate students that they're allowed to work. And so that's basically the max salary. And some people can take on additional international students, for example, because of legal reasons, cannot take more than 50% work. So they're already sort of, and they also actually pay more fees than domestic students. So there are, different people have to pay a lot more money based on their situations. And for example, people with children, they do get a stipend from the university to reimburse childcare costs, but they're woefully inadequate for the amount of money that it costs to raise children on a $24,000 salary. And so yeah, I know I had a sort of a research assistantship, which was at 25% throughout the school year. So that means my work was at 75% on top of my TA-ship, and that was paid out at an hourly wage rate. And so I know, a bunch of people have to take on extra labor, whether that's another research position, whether that's working at, a local coffee shop, whether that's, I know someone that's literally working like for a startup at the same time, because they're like, I can't afford rent. I need to make a bigger salary. And so people are really stretched thin in terms of their time, because it often takes, it's 50% FTE, which is supposed to be around 20 hours allotted of work. And yet a lot of times, teaching and grading requires often more than 20 hours of work per week. So not only are people often going over the 20 hours, but they often have to take care of additional things and also work on their own research, right? The reason that a lot of us are brought to this university is to do research, to produce knowledge in some sense that the university also capitalizes on in the end. And so, that's labor that is going towards the university in some capacity as well. So all these things are things that, basically in order for us to do all the things that the university expects us to do and do them well, $24,000 in no scenario can cut it in Santa Barbara, let alone in most places in the country. And so yeah, we know of graduate students that were living in their cars. There was a huge rallies last year around the housing crisis in Santa Barbara, and these things aren't going away anytime soon, in terms of housing precarity, and people who just are really struggling to make ends meet. And so that's why we're fighting. The thing that we're fighting for is can seem quite large to people. I think there's been a lot of false equivocations around. Oh, does that mean if you're asking for $54,000 at 50%, does that mean you're actually asking for over $100,000 as a graduate student? It's like, actually, no, we're not asking for that. So I think, I'm really trying to understand the difficulties of having to teach, to grade, to produce research, to deal with faculty that sometimes often overburdens us with labor. It's a difficult thing for a lot of people. So yeah.
So I have to make this point that it's obvious to anyone on the faculty, to anyone in the administration, that the the people that we're talking about, the research assistants, the teaching assistants, the various categories involved in this are underpaid, because that's the business model of the university. Given the budgetary constraints, how do you get what I'll call the shit work of academia done by people who are qualified to do it, but where the budgets are limited? Well, you underpay them, and the return they're getting theoretically is the training. This is all training for future success in the careers. But given housing prices, for one, I would say it's an untenable business model at this point in terms of survival, literal survival. The idea of the artist or intellectual in a garret becoming who they should be, this is a kind of romantic idea, but the garrets are overpriced now. Maybe is that a comment you would resonate with or want to take off on, Michael? Michael?
Sorry, Dick, you cut off me. Can you re-ask the question? You just cut off me at the last second. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anyway, you said personal research is completely unpaid for. I didn't quite get what you wrote there, Michael.
Oh, yes. I think the question was in terms of our own research that we do, if that's, paid by the university. And in terms of TAs, no. So we get paid for our TA labor, which, often includes going to the lectures, grading, holding sections. So that's teaching, your own class. Usually it's either 2 or 3 sections a week. And so, yeah, so that's all the labor that we're paid for as TAs. And so anything that my own research, for example, if I have to, go to LA to do some research on my field site, all of that time is unpaid time that, is a personal, cost to me. So I think it looks a little bit differently if you're a graduate student researcher. So if you work more in the STEM field, obviously all of your work is based around research. So in that case, you are paid for your research in that sense, but often that's not your personal. That's maybe you're funded by your PI, or your instructor, your advisor to work for them under their project, and so it could be not necessarily your own project as well. So in terms of us, yeah, that all the research stuff is unpaid.
So, Connie, what if I said this is not just the university administration that is and should be a target of this? It's the legislature and the regents as well, because the purse strings and the budgetary priorities are set not just by the administration, but by the state government.
Yes. One of the things, I mean, I know how effective rhetorically it is for the union to say, if we were fully funded all of our demands, that would still just be 2 or 3% of the overall UC budget of 50 billion or whatever it is, but that's I don't think that's the right way to look at it, because it takes pressure off the people who are really going to have to come up with the funds and who have neglected to come up with the funds. They've neglected to publicly fund public higher education. And as Dick was just saying, our focus needs to be on the legislature. It needs to be on the governor. It needs to be on the regents. And all of them, from the perspective of, what the faculty association system-wide, we see that they are so complacent, they are so accepting of the idea that the way the University of California is going to go forward is through tuition. It's just not going to give up on tuition. It's just not going to give up on, let's privatize the University of California and put the cost onto the students and their parents. And so, and then also the regents, the governor, office of the president, the higher administration seem to believe that tuition and relying on tuition, public wealth, and private wealth and private equity are the way to go, and we have seen just the disaster in every way of what that increasing privatization has come to. So faculty association, as I've been saying, we are very much working, on the ground around the demands of in this strike, because they are just such reasonable demands. And what I like about the way, though, that the union effort has put its figures together, they're not starting from, oh, this is our wish list. They are starting from, this is what it costs to sustain life, as an academic student worker. And so they're going back from there. So what looks like, raise by half again for compensation, that's again, that's not a figure that's been pulled out of the air. That's been a figure that we have been, looking at and developing over many years. So another thing that I appreciate about this particular activity here, this strike, is that the organizers are always trying to give it that context. When people say, oh, what you're asking for is exorbitant and impossible, the state budget couldn't afford that, the University of California couldn't afford that, but it is it's only impossible because we have come to accept that that's just the way it is, that we're no longer going to have public funding of public higher education. So what I like about the way the union has presented the issues, it's always within that larger context. And it's always, yes, we know everybody else in California has a rent burden, do not have living wages, do not have the kind of access to health and childcare and education that we all need. And so I know vanguardism is not a great word, but anyway, I do see this union effort, as being in the forefront of fighting on these issues for everyone. And that's been the language, and I think that's crucially important.
Let me add a concrete thing that has to do with SBCAN's work over the past decade or so. We are part of this coalition called Sustainable University Now, SUN, which includes several other environmental groups. And that exists in order to hold the university to account on its long-range development plan. And these organizations have supported increased enrollment at the university because that enrollment plan was coupled with a very ambitious housing agenda that the university pledged to do. That not only housed 5,000 more undergraduates on campus than they now do, but equally important to the community, creating 1,840 staff and faculty units on campus to house, and that was explicitly a commitment to help the community deal with the overall affordable housing shortage. And all of that housing is supposed to be subsidized and below market. But the current strike includes the publicity over the fact that even the subsidized housing the university does provide may not be affordable to a lot of the people who are in the strike because they're underpaid in relation to that. But SBCAN's and SUN's interest is they haven't delivered on any of the housing promises that have been made. The Munger project, this huge, the world's largest dormitory, if built, would, in some sense, house thousands of students, but in conditions that and circumstances that have become very contentious. So 10 years ago, there was a plan, and the Nexus yesterday, the student paper, had a beautiful article about this. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was planning for campus housing that was derailed by the Munger project. All of these original plans were not done, put aside in order to focus on this Munger edifice complex. And the faculty and staff housing still has not been built. The reasons have to do with what Connie was talking about. The university, in order to build these housings now, have to find private developers and private philanthropists to finance them. And that's turned out to be making pacts with various kinds of devils. Part of the reason for the unaffordability of even the subsidized housing is that private developers are managing the housing in many cases, and the Ocean Road project, which the university is trying to bring into being, would be managed by a national private developer. And I think that the evidence is they are not going to be that able, the private developers who want to make a profit, to offer housing at the level which Michael pointed out would be the appropriate level, namely that people in these housings should not have to pay more than 30% of their income for the housing. That should be the design of university staff and faculty housing, rather than what they now say, which is it'll be below market, 10% below market. That's a huge price. 10% below market is not a very affordable price for most working people. So that's how one of the ways the community, I think, is implicated and affected by all of this, having to do with with this overall housing crisis.
Dick, could I just add 2 points to what you said?
Yes, George Rellis is involved in Sun. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, Sun was formed not about the housing. We were formed concerned about transportation, environment, and things like that. The housing was completely the university's idea. That was their commitment was where they started. And they actually performed on everything else we negotiated with them except the housing. And the other thing that Dick alluded to, but when you look at this regionally, if they don't build the 1,800 units for faculty and staff have to search for those units in the community. And that means that people who don't have housing on campus compete for those things. And we already had a housing crisis here, as everybody knows. By university not doing what they committed to do, they're creating a hyper crisis. And so I think there's obviously a community need to urge the university to do what they originally intended to do, what was their idea. I don't want to take credit for having negotiated that. It was their idea. It's in the LRDP, and you should know it's also in signed agreements that they have with Sun, which are enforceable, which the legislature can't undo. And they're in the signed agreements with the city and the county, which means, not surprisingly, that the city and the county have each commenced lawsuits against the university.
So we're at a kind of a perfect storm about a lot of these issues, and I think we owe gratitude to the strikers for bringing things to a head, if you might say, or one imagines they might be in this. So I notice on the chat, Michael, that you posted a way for people to support the strike fund. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this is just the official sort of strike fund across all the different UCs for all the workers who are currently on strike. And so I encourage folks to give there if they can. And then I think there are probably some smaller mutual aid efforts that are specifically around our campus. I can try to find a link for that as well, in terms of maybe providing some. And then all those funds will go towards supplies that people need on the line, food, water, etc. Just to keep people out here and keep them fed. I encourage people to do that. And then I just think the last point I think that maybe ties Connie and Dick and George's sort of comments together is I think I think what we're demanding for is something that's actually quite transformative, and it's in the logic of demanding this sort of thing, because I think the university could just keep throwing these percentages and these numbers in terms of a wage increase, but what we're actually asking for, demanding, is something that's quite different, which is a different metric to measure well-being, or a different metric to measure how we can sustain ourselves as workers, to be housed in a place that is affordable, that is safe, and that isn't costing us too much money, so we can't afford to live a good life and to be good workers. And I think that we also have a housing demand attached. One of the articles around that we've raised, that's a new article in our new contract, would be around housing, which would guarantee 5 years of UC controlled housing for any graduate student or graduate worker who would want that. The issue is that such housing yet does not exist. And so part of that article would enable the UAW to negotiate, be part of the negotiation process with the university in terms of developing a better housing plan. But as you know, as folks mentioned, as we already know, that the UC is getting sued from multiple ends in terms of its commitments for not creating new housing. And so hopefully, you know, even something like this would force the UC to actually create more housing that people want, not these projects like Dick was mentioning, like Munger Hall, that have been extremely unpopular, but things that, you know, are people actually would feel comfortable living in, because more housing in general is more housing for all people, just in terms of this campus, which is also enrollment has increased substantially over time as well. So yeah. That's all to say. I enjoy all the comments, and I think they're all really helpful in thinking through what we're trying to really demand here.
So one last question from the chat that maybe you can answer or give some kind of thought to answering is, what is the likely scenario or trajectory of the strike? What can you share about that?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to predict what might happen. I think because for a number of reasons. So our bargaining team, which in terms of our union, basically consists of 2 representatives from each of the 10 campuses. So that's, you know, 20 people that represents all of our 19,000 workers that are represented, and they have a lot of power in determining, you know, what the eventual agreement to the tentative agreement of our contract looks like. And so that in terms of the bargaining team, they could actually end it, you know, at any point that they see as fit. In terms of on our end, I think there's a really strong sense that we're ready for this to go as long as it needs to go, and till we get what we want. And I feel this very strongly, the sense of the rank and file across all the campuses who feel this way. And that's, you know, a testament to a lot of the organizing that's gone into it beforehand, but also just a testament to how people are struggling a lot. And this is actually the only way that they think we can make any progress at all. And so, you know, this coming week is, you know, the holiday break. And so we'll only effectively have, you know, 2 days of being on campus. And then, you know, we'll see what happens after that point. But I think in terms of the workers, we're prepared for the long haul. I think the next inflection point will be when grades are due this quarter, which is December 14th. So I think I don't know. I can't predict. But I think, you know, the leverage that we have as specifically as TAs is grades, because that's the sort of check that the university needs in order to, you know, push people through the system. And so we're prepared, you know, to take all the measures that we need to until the UC actually provides a reasonable offer. So it's hard to say, but I will say that we're ready for it, Dick. Yeah.
Okay.
And I would like, do I have a minute to just say?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I have some optimism, you know, about UC settling. And let me just throw it out there. If this is indeed the biggest such labor action in US higher education history, okay, that's something, once again, the whole world is watching. But when you look at some of the big, although by comparison to this, not so big, student strikes, grad student strikes at Columbia and NYU, you know, and they are private universities, you know, and they can do whatever they want. I mean, I'll paraphrase here, but you know, they can say, yeah, right, we're capitalists, you know, we're like private, you know, we can do whatever we want, you know. And but this is about, you know, the biggest, maybe most important public higher education system in the world, you know. And so I think that just, you know, that the just overwhelming positive responses, supportive responses getting in the public and in the press, I do think is going to help. The other thing that gives me hope is that our most recent effort, the CAAFT lecturers' demands. That was not only, and again, we had like a ton of effort across campuses in support of the lecturers. They got UC folded. UC gave the lecturers everything they were asking for, although they did put it in one of those insidious, no strike clauses in the settlement. But that contract for the lecturers became the inspiration and a model for lecturers around the country. That's already been written about as a really important historical moment. So I don't know. I'm a bit hopeful here. I know it's still going to be a long struggle, but I'm hopeful.
Professor Wynant.
Yes, I mentioned at the beginning that this is the class struggle. Let me just say very quickly, UC is the third largest employer in the state of California. At the same time, it's important to recognize, as Connie is already mentioning, that these strikes are going on around the country. Numerous private universities have capitulated, have lost. You mentioned Columbia and NYU. Both of those universities have signed contracts with their graduate student workers. In addition, when we look at the strike wave that's happening in the United States today, we tend to break the different strikers' struggles up, and we need to think of them as one coordinated effort. In other words, we look at Starbucks or we look at Amazon and numerous other places. Those strikes, those struggles are in many, many ways connected, not just abstractly, but through the participation of different organizations like Democratic Socialists of America, for example, which are trying to work across these boundaries to revive that class struggle. Let me just say also how much is on the line here nationally, and how, sorry to disagree with you about this, Connie, but I think the UC is going to resist this like crazy. And the public political campaign that we're going to see against the strike is going to be enormous. I have some experience in this, having participated in several academic strikes in other universities. We are going to be blamed. The graduate students are going to be blamed. Excuse me, for immiserating the undergraduate students, for punishing parents who are trying so hard to assist their kids, achieving middle-class status and finding a job, et cetera, that those kinds of battles, public relations or political battles, definitely need to be anticipated. I was pleased to see Catherine from Monique Ramon's office here, because it's really important for us to reach out to not only to politicians who are supportive to us and want the legislature itself to intervene and make budgetary adjustments that are necessary here, which has been talked about, but also it's necessary for us to have public spokespeople who address the fact that UC is a corporate structure. You strike Columbia, you strike Harvard. By the way, Harvard is also capitulated to a graduate student union. And you're kind of aware that you're fighting the private sector, you're fighting the corporations. But in fact, who are the UC Regents? They're not really different from this. They are also corporate actors who by definition are trying to exploit the UC for private profit and private gain. So it's just a tremendous struggle. Let me just say also to close that the UC will use divide and conquer tactics, and they are already doing that. They've made offers to postdocs, which are much more generous than anything they've even floated for the vast majority of the striking UC workers who are graduate students. The idea will be divide and conquer all the way down the line, and they are known as hard-headed bargainers and anti-bargaining actually forces. So what I would say overall is two things. One, or maybe three things. One, recognize this is national. Two, and not only local, not only statewide, but national. Two, realize that divide and conquer hardball tactics are coming. And three, hold on to the fact that the strike has the power to hurt the university much more than it would ever hurt the students. And enter that battle and point to the threat to the university and the state of California that this strike represents, and that the university, the regents, and the legislature have the power to resolve this issue, and that it is not an attack on the students, it's a defense of the students around housing, as we've said, and also around employment.
Thank you very much. So I would add, so you've heard a good academic theoretical discussion in a way, but informed by very good practical wisdom. And what I would just add to that, being an academic, is the student body, undergraduate, is different from what it was in the past. It's a much more of a rainbow in class and ethnic terms, and the graduate students as well. The strikers are a rainbow. They're the two populations of graduate students and undergraduates are much more like the population of the general state than you might have thought was the case in the past. And the experience of the graduate students now, I think, strikes chords with a lot of the undergraduates. They're going to face many of the same circumstances in the future. It's their fight as well. And it's the fight of their families as well. So there's a lot going on here that is, I think, profound. And we've touched on some of this. I want to thank so much, Michael. Carry on the work. We'll try to have your back if we can. And Constance as well. Thank you for enlightening us. And Michael just applauded Howie's great summary. So we're all on the same page. We got more on the agenda here, and I don't want to lose too much time for that to happen. So, Gail, do you want to, there are 2 points here, two issues that are rising and organizations developing around in the community. One has the League of Women Voters becoming much more than I remember active on really foregrounding issues like housing, but also criminal justice. So, and then there's who's here to represent this concern about the cruise ships?
It looks like Benjamin Pitterly's here.
Okay, all right, so we will do about 15 minutes of each on each of these. Go, Gail, take it.
Thank you. I hope Michael will stay with us for a few minutes, because I heard you say you teach and work in criminal justice. And the League of Women Voters of Santa Barbara and Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice in Santa Barbara have this joint effort to try to deal with what is really a terrible situation in our jails. And I've already put a link in the chat to where you can go to sign a petition that we started a few weeks ago at Bread and Roses. We were invited by the Fund for Santa Barbara to table and bring a petition, and it's a petition that will go to the Santa Barbara Board of Supervisors to transform criminal justice. And we've been before the board many times, but this is kind of a way to encapsulate the things that are most critical to reducing the number of people who are held in our two jails. Because right now, 80% of the people residing in our jails are unsentenced. So a very large percentage are misdemeanors. They are not dangerous to the community. There's not a risk if we were to release them, but they spend anywhere from a few days to several years without being sentenced. And it has huge implications for their lives, their families, their children, their job security, their housing, everything. So a single bed for a year in the jail is over $81,000. It's almost $82,000. We could be helping people with that money by housing them, getting them the mental health treatment they need. We have documented about 27% of the people in our jails, locked up in our jails, have documentable serious mental illness. We think the number residing there with some kind of mental struggle is much larger. I can't put a number on it. Could be 50, could be 60%. So a lot of this comes down to whether the county chooses to put its dollars in serving the community with the housing it needs and the mental health care it needs, and other things. So it's not that our board doesn't know these things, but we want to bring it to their attention. So we would love for you all to go to this website and sign our petition, which is there. It has 5 parts, 5 topics, which is about safely reducing the number in our jail. We are told we could easily reduce it by about 200 if we just did the things that a population expert recommended and that grand juries have recommended. Obviously, we need to increase community services. In the jail, people with mental illness get meds, but they don't get treatment. That's probably true of not just mental health, but drug addiction, alcohol addiction, and other issues. We want, one of the ways to lower the numbers is to give fair and equal representation, or at least equitable representation, to indigent clients. So our public defender generally gets to meet with their client for the first time at the arraignment, and they maybe get 10 minutes alone with them. That's not enough time to get them calmed down and understand what the system is about, let alone finding out enough information to tell the judge this person has housing, this person has children, this person doesn't belong in jail, and why. So there is a proposal in that will come into we're trying to get serious money into the public defender and to probation, behavioral wellness, and some other things. That our public defender operates holistic defense. So there are social workers on her team, and they and the investigators helped put together the documentation that helps people be out on their own reconnaissance while they resolve their cases. And we also don't have in our system fair and equal access to evidence. So the public defender often gets information way later than the district attorney does. And that's a real huge disservice to people who may be, really unfairly locked up. And so that's what the petition's about. And we hope you'll get it out to your colleagues, your friends, your other members of your organizations. And we would like to see all those names come in on the petition before Tuesday, if possible. I know that's short, but we're hoping to transfer the petition to the board next week and then show up for public comment in the following week on the 29th of November. So I don't know if you have any questions, but that's what the League and CLUE are really focused on right now. And all of this matters to your tax dollars because the sheriff is trying to get this well, we have to do something about renovating the old jail. It's 50 years old, it's archaic, and it violates all kinds of codes. It did it the day it was built. And the sheriff would like to see our jails have 800 beds, and we don't need 800 beds. We need beds in mental health and in other things. So that's kind of the history. And our group is pretty laser focused on not spending too much money and building the wrong kind of jail in Santa Barbara. So there we go.
If there is Lee Heller points out the board is probably not meeting this Tuesday, so
Right.
that
No, we just we know that it's useful to get things in so they can see them and read them in the week before their next meeting. So we know the first time to talk to them is on November 29th, and we may delay that, but I think that's what we're aiming for now.
So if there's any way that the SBCAN board might consider some kind of resolution in relation to this, if you want to send that to the Ken Hoff, that would be excellent, because we're having a board meeting in a couple of weeks.
We have other organizations that are sending in letters simultaneously supporting the petition on behalf of their groups, and sometimes adding more of what they are particularly focused on.
Right, we could do that. Any questions to Gail and Pam about this action? So I see that Lee Heller is here, and Lee, do you want to take the lead? Or am I cutting short somebody? Any question?
No, I think it's more that Ben is going to be talking about the cruise ships.
Oh.
I'm his backup, but he's
Okay.
certainly got more expertise than I do, and I believe he is in the meeting.
Okay, Ben, are you there?
Yeah, hi guys. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks for having me, and I apologize. I'm sitting in my car right now. I just got out of a separate meeting talking about cruise ships actually, but I'm happy to join you. And so here's what's going on. So the city of Santa Barbara, so I'm the science and policy director with Santa Barbara Channel Keeper. So we're an environmental group in Santa Barbara, and we focus on the health of the channel and local streams, rivers, our watersheds. We focus a lot on pollution issues. The city of Santa Barbara has been hosting cruise ships annually since, I believe, 2002 was when their program initiated, and it's ebbed and flowed a little bit, but over time, the number of ships that the city's been hosting has increased. This year, there was a brief pause during COVID, but this year they're back on track, and we had 30 ships. The season just ended. 30 ships visited. I think it was the highest number of ships ever. Being an environmental group, the cruise industry has a very sort of checkered history and sort of environmental compliance, and there are a number of pollution issues related to cruise ships that our organization is concerned about. The city, for its part, it's tried to address that by adopting these voluntary commitments that the captains agree to when they visit, primarily a voluntary no discharge zone within 12 miles of Santa Barbara Harbor. And so that's been the policy that's been in place. There's really no official way to monitor or enforce that. Our organization, for many years, we have a research vessel in the harbor, and we take it out. We try to meet ships that are coming in as they're traveling through that zone, and mainly we hail them and let them know we're keeping an eye out and ask them to confirm they're not discharging. But after COVID, the city approached us because they were reevaluating that list, that voluntary commitment, the captain's agreement that ships sign on to. And we made the point, there's another organization called Friends of the Earth, and they every year they look at all the ships, the cruise ship industry, and they assign grades. There's a report card, a cruise ship report card to each ship, and based on a number of things, but primarily, presence of certain technologies on each ship that would minimize or prevent pollution, or the absence of those technologies, and then some other practices and compliance history. And we took a look when the city released its schedule last spring, we took a look at the ships that were visiting Santa Barbara and noticed that most of the ships have, you know, very poor grades, D's or F's, at least how they're ranked based on this system. And so we mentioned to the city whether or not they would consider, you know, maybe we should be limiting the types of ships that we're hosting here, you know, based on things like compliance history, you know, companies that have, you know, criminal violations for discharging pollution into the ocean, or maybe some ships that are dirtier than others. And that recommendation didn't really go anywhere at the time. However, we were successful in getting the Santa Barbara Harbor Commission to form a subcommittee to at least have a discussion and allow community input, right, so that we can explore this issue more. So the city's increased its number of ships we've been hosting over the years, but there's never really been a robust opportunity for the community to speak up. It's just been a waterfront department program that feeds their annual budget. So as we've been gaining more traction, I think, on highlighting this issue, more and more individuals and groups have been expressing interest in addressing this as well. And so we are in the midst of forming a coalition of organizations and individuals who also are hoping to see some change on with city policy. And at this point, what we're expressing to the city is that we would like them to adopt, and we'll be presenting more specific recommendations shortly. But at this point, our message is it's time to re-examine the cruise ship program. And what we'd like them to do is consider looking at policies that would potentially filter out ships that visit based on things like technologies on board, compliance history, etc. But based on factors related to the impacts that these ships may or may not have on the environment. And the preliminary, based on some preliminary discussions with some city leaders, you know, we feel we may have some traction on this. There has been some folks have expressed an openness, at least, to considering this. And so I think that our main goal here, and one of the reasons I'm excited to speak to this group, is really our main goal. Our job now is to turn out and just to demonstrate, you know, we've been telling the city that this is an important issue the community really cares about. I mean, we hear about it as an organization. People are coming out of the woodwork saying, you know, we support this. And so we need to demonstrate that's true, you know, to city leaders through various forums moving forward. And the first opportunity to do that is actually coming up on December 1st. I forwarded your group an email, sorry, because I'm in my car and I'm on my phone, so I can't really enter this easily in chat right now, but I would love to follow up with anyone from your group who's interested in joining us on December 1st. There's a Harbor Commission cruise ship subcommittee meeting. It's from noon to 1 at the waterfront classroom. And there's going to be a presentation by the Air Quality Control District on emissions from ships when they're transiting and at anchor. That's an important issue. But it's also an opportunity. This is the second subcommittee meeting. And this is really our opportunity to start turning people out and showing city leaders that, yes, like there's support behind this, and we'd like to see some changes in city policy. And so I've distributed to you guys through Nadia, I think, a sample set of talking points and some general info about kind of to bring this meeting into kind of the context of this meeting and what our broader goals are. But yeah, I was invited to be here today. I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have about.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please. Thanks.
So lots of people may not be able to make that meeting on December 1st, which is totally fine. And the council themselves will not be there, but the place we can also continue to influence the council is by emailing the council members directly, and no need to wait on that. So if people want to start if they haven't already done it, emailing the council members to express their concerns and offer their ideas. Anytime is good. Anytime you do that is good.
Yeah, there's one other thing. We've formed a group email list, right, of people who we send out an action alert, and we're hoping that other groups will share the action alert. But if you're interested in just following this issue as it moves forward, getting updates and being notified of additional opportunities to weigh in, you could send an email. We set up an email address. It's cruise ship at SBCK.org. And if you just send an email, say you'd like to join, we'll keep you updated, because there will be more opportunities to weigh in.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ben, you didn't mention the huge amount
Sure.
of diesel emissions from these cruise ships. I read various things about how they can generate more than, all the traffic on 101. Are you involved in, am I right? And are you involved in that, or somebody else involved with it?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's one of the things that we are highlighting, the air emissions issues. So, I started researching that myself early in this process when I had a conversation with somebody who said, isn't it more, if all those tourists, we support tourism, so if all those tourists came to Santa Barbara driving, wouldn't that be worse than putting them on a ship? And I thought, that's a good question. We should look into it. So based on some research, and actually the Santa Barbara County Air Pollution Control District was helpful with this. They have some models that they ran, and maybe not surprisingly, like, no, it's far worse. I mean, cruise ships, they're about the dirtiest way that you could get anybody anywhere. And one of the issues that we are highlighting is Santa Barbara's recent commitment to achieve carbon neutrality by 2035, right? And so the county air pollution district tells us that just while sitting at anchor for 8 hours at Santa Barbara, so not even getting here and from, but just while they're sitting there, ships generate something like 80 tons of carbon dioxide alone, and of course other pollutants as well. And so, yes, it's an important issue, and it's one that we definitely want to highlight and draw attention to.
And I point out that Nadia posted the talking points that you guys have for that meeting. And generally, I guess, without looking at it, I assume it's talking points that could be used if people want to write letters and stuff like that, correct? So that's very helpful. The chats for these roundtables are always packed with very useful information. I'm kind of proud of the fact that not only do we learn from the interaction, but we have all of these links and so forth on the chat. So I'm very happy with the way we run these, speaking very boastfully myself, because I think they are highly informative sessions, and today was no exception. Very grateful to you, Benjamin, and to Lee, and to the Pam and Gail for introducing us to these issues. Is there anything, Janet, do you have something you wanted to say, or am I just reading your mind? Any other announcements or concerns people want to raise before we adjourn?
Can I just point out on the chat that Lee has also posted her email if somebody wants help with creating an email to give to the council.
Right.
And that the Nadia has posted an email address as well.
So
Dick,
Yeah, so that email address is the one Ben said about, you can email them to get added to the email list, to get updates about this. But we'll also be, assuming our board approves SBCAN joining this effort, we will also be sending out information.
Just a little bit of background on the ships in the harbor. I've been on the Air Pollution Control District Community Advisory Commission for, I don't know, 10 years or something. And a bunch of years ago, probably 8 or so, it was required for any kind of ship in our harbor to slow way down. So there was a much lower speed limit in Santa Barbara Harbor than other places. So working on this cruise ship thing is very important as well.
Thank you. And I see that Catherine Carmichael, Senator Lemone's assistant, she says if anyone has any questions or concerns they would like to bring to our office, email her at, her email address is up there, catherine.carmichael@sen. You can see the email on chat. And we are always very happy to have people representing our electeds at this table. Thank you all, and happy Thanksgiving. And let us move forward together for a brighter tomorrow. Take care, guys. Thank you.
Dick.
Thanks.